Geographical Discoveries. The American War of Independence, French Revolution and Industrial Revolution have significantly changed modern history of the world. The Industrial Revolution was a significant development during the 18th century. The world came under the impact of the Industrial Revolution. The imperialism in the modern period was a result of this revolution. In the olden times, the kings used to have the ambition of dominating the neighboring or distant regions. This royal ambition gave rise to the Greek, the Roman and the Turkish empires. In India, there was powerful empires established by Chandragupta Maurya, King Ashok and Emperor Akbar. The source of inspiration of the traditional imperialism consisted in the regional pride and display of the army. In the beginning, the kings and emperors would give less importance to the acquisition of wealth and the financial profits, while expanding their territories. However, in the modern times, the concept of imperialism. Learning objective. At the end of this chapter, you will be able to define imperialism, cite the reasons for imperialism, explain the various forms of imperialism, describe imperialism in prominent countries of world. Geographical discoveries. In 1453, Constantinople, Istanbul, was closed by Turks for Europeans. This was short route for Asia, as Europeans had ties with Asia for trading. They felt need to find new route to Asia. Henry, the King of Portugal, inspired the navigators to find new sea routes to eastern nations. The sailor's compass, astrolabe, newly designed books were useful in sailing. Navigators followed the assumption of Copernicus that Earth is round and not flat. They discovered new regions of the world. Christopher Columbus, John Cabot, Amerigo Vespucci discovered the northern, eastern and central parts of American continent in the 15th century. Vasco da Gama found out a new sea route to India. Ferdinand Magellan undertook task of travelling around the earth by sea route. Spain, Portugal, Holland set up colonies in newly discovered regions, and this led to competition among European nations for dominating newly discovered regions of the world. Imperialism. An introduction. Imperialism was caused by colonialism, one country's people dominating other countries' specific territories and settling down there means colonization. Imperialism can be defined as domination of an undeveloped nation by a developed nation by virtue of establishing a colony. It will be important to know the definition of term imperialism while understanding its concept. The term imperialism has been derived from Latin word imperium, meaning right to rule. Imperialism can be defined as domination of an undeveloped nation by a developed nation by virtue of establishing a colony. Reasons for imperialism. The European nations changed due to Renaissance movement. Scientific inventions. The inventions of steam engine, electricity and coal revolutionized the means of transport. Science motivated creation of modern weapons and tremendous ambition in human beings. Industrial Revolution. Production increased due to machines. The pace of production increased. This led to difficulty for some nations to sell products in their national boundaries and need to find new markets. Need of raw material. Industrial Revolution led to scarcity of raw materials. There was competition in Europe for selling domestic products. Hence, prices need to be decreased to stay in competition. Hence, European nations turned to Asian and African nations. property of Asia and Africa. Africa had huge deposits of gold, diamonds and coal. Asian countries were rich in spices. This led European nations to bring Asian and African nations under imperial rule. Economic imperialism. The objective of new imperialism was to bring profit by exploiting the resources of the undeveloped nations by economic and political domination. This form of imperialism is called economic imperialism. In 18th century, England was called origin of industrial revolution. It was followed by other European nations. These nations had huge finances due to business companies. The economic system was based on production and exchange of goods. Various forms of economic imperialism. Number 1. Imposing political independence. Number 2. Ensuring security to nations. Number 3. Bringing compulsory business agreements. Number 4. Creating business monopoly. Number 5. Implementing divide and rule policy. By adopting various ways, the European nations imposed imperialism on the Asian nations like India, China, Japan, Myanmar, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Thailand. Imperialism in India was brought about by the Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, and the British. The Britishers dominated India by ruling in states like South India, Bengal, Punjab through Karnataka battles, Battle of Plassey, and finally there was a complete rule of British in India. The Portuguese. In 1498 AD, Vasco da Gama, the Portuguese sailor, came to the Calicut, Kozhikode port of India via South African peninsula. Calicut is a port on the western coast of India. The Portuguese had great importance in Indian politics. They tried to propagate their religion and business. They restricted to Goa, Diu and Daman islands only. The Dutch could only establish their control over the Southeast Asian islands only. In 1625 AD, the French began their trade. They dominated Chandranagar, Pondicherry, Karaikal, Yaman and Mahe. The British. In 1600 AD, British set up East India Company to start business. In 1615 AD, the East India Company was permitted to erect a business centre in Surat by Jahangir. They began to interfere in Indian politics when Mughal Emperor showed the sign of decline and made India their base. Karnataka battles in Karnataka. There was conflict in business affair between France and England. The first battle was won by French due to Commander Dupleix. The second battle was won by British commander Robert Clive. In the third battle in the year 1760, England defeated French and made their roots stronger in India. The rise of British rule in Bengal. The Battle of Plassey in 1757 and the Battle of Buxar in 1764 led the way for English rule in India. The expansion of British rule in South India. Hyder Ali was defeated by British in collaboration with Nizams and Marathas. There had been 3 battles between Marathas and British between 1775 and 1818. In the first battle, Mahatji Shinde defeated British. In second and third battles, British defeated Shinde, and Maratha Empire came to an end. Power in Punjab. The British could not do anything until Maharaja Ranjit Singh was on the throne. After his death in 1839, the internal conflict among successors paved the way for British Empire in Punjab. Absolute rule of British. Lord Dalhousie introduced doctrine of lapse and brought princely states into British Empire. In the 100 years between 1757 and 1857, Almost the entire region of India was brought under the governance of imperialism in China. China believed their culture is the most superior in the world. The Portuguese were the first European traders in China. The Portuguese were the first European traders in China. This was followed by the traders from France, England, Holland, Belgium and Russia. China didn't allow anyone to interfere into its internal region for about 200 years. Those who wanted to enter into China were made to pay tributes to Chinese emperor. China earned a lot of profit by selling tea, silk and vessels. After Industrial Revolution, Western goods were sold in China. The First Opium War. The British merchants used to sell opium from India in China. The Chinese government was against this business. But the European traders continued to smuggle and sell opium into China in exchange with silver. The First Opium War in 1840 saw defeat of China, forcing Manchu Empire to sign a treaty, Nanking Treaty, in 1842 with England. According to this treaty, England was given control of 4 ports. Taking this advantage, America, France, Belgium, Holland, Portugal and Russia sought concessions from China. The Second Opium War. In 1856, England again defeated China and ended with Peking Treaty. This was Second Opium War. This brought 6 more Chinese ports under control of England. Russia also defeated China and brought Amur Sea coast under its control. Japan too defeated China and brought part of Chinese region under its control. The economic domination of China by European nations can be seen as follows. England controlled the business and excise of China. France had Chinese postal service. Chinese railways was dominated by Europe. China was divided under power sectors by imperial nations. This is called cutting of Chinese melon. In 1899, America came up with this policy to avoid political division of China and taking financial advantage. All the imperial nations accepted the American decision. Russia refused and China remained undivided. Imperialism in Japan. The doors of Japan had been closed for 150 years for European nations. In 1850, America paid special attention to Japan for business. In 1852, Commodore Matthew Perry was appointed as a chief of the American naval mission to Japan. Request to Japanese government to ensure safety to American ships within marine boundaries of Japan among with business concessions. The Kanagawa Treaty. On 1854, Japanese Prime Minister Tokugawa Shogun signed a business agreement. America was allowed entry to Shimonda and Hakodate ports for procuring wood, coal and water. American envy could stay in Japan. American sailors in distress should be given Japanese assistance. America was allowed to do business by local rules and regulations. England, France, Russia and Holland desired to acquire business concession in Japan, like America, and started exploiting Japan. Japan recognized its weakness and altered its policies. Japan modernized itself by learning from mistakes committed. It endeared the policy of imperial expansion. It made announcement, Asia was for people of Asia and Japan for Japanese. It also defeated China and Russia and became a powerful nation in Asia. Imperialism in Africa. The Portuguese sailor Bartolomé Dias landed in Cape of Good Hope instead of India. Till the middle of 19th century, Westerns were not aware of interior of African continent. Hence, it was known as unknown or dark continent. The travelogue written by Stanley created a kind of attraction towards Africa. So, there began a competition of capturing Africa among European nations. Division of Africa and imperial expansion in 1870. England had set up colonies in coastal regions of Cape Natal, Lagos, Gold Coast, France in Algeria, France Guinea, Ivory Coast, Portugal, in Mozambique and Angola. Effects of imperialism. Constructive side of imperialism. Physical reformation. Europeans had to bring in physical reformation such as constructing good roads, railway, post, telegraph, canals, etc. to maintain control over colonies. Spread of education. Instead of importing educated people from their native places, the colonizers begin to educate the local people for rising qualified manpower necessary in assisting administration. Intellectual change. Colonization introduced innovative ideas, technology, science, philosophy, etc. A progressive mindset was created to uproot ignorance and blind faith. National integrity. The imperial nations bought scattered regions under one governing system. Hence, there grew national integrity. Rise of new leadership. The newly educated middle class started to oppose the Western imperialism and hence started many struggles for freedom. Destructive side of imperialism. Trade of slaves. The imperial nations developed habit of trading slaves for getting laborers at cheaper prices. Decline of values. Imperial nations adapted divide and rule policy leading to violence, selfishness and indulgence among people. Economic exploitation. The imperial nations found undeveloped nations as source of raw materials. Thus, colonies were economically exploited. Destruction of village autonomy. Farmers had to mortgage their land to white government. Instead of money, they had to give their land to government. Hence, farmers became bankrupt. Suppression of underdeveloped nations. The imperial nations had objective of developing themselves by ruling the colonies. Armament race. The rivalry among European nations braced up its military for security, which led to arms race. Summary. You have learned that imperialism, the reasons for imperialism, the various forms of imperialism in prominent countries of world.